getting ripped off. Someone's got to ask, well, why did they take the not follow your recommendations, call you a racist, investigate you instead of just fixing the problem? Why did they do that? What could be the answer? Anyone want to hazard a Mr. Shirley, you want to hazard a guess why that's the case?
Well, they simply use that as a deflection technique to make you not want to speak out against the fraud.
Yeah, it seems to me it's politics, though. You think it's politics, Mr. Dexter?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, the people at the top, like, well, we don't want to do this. We don't want to be called racist. In fact, we found that out a week ago in a hearing where we were looking at this Feeding Our Future program. We found out they actually shut that program off for a while. They said, time out, something's not right here. They found the same kind of things you found, Mr. Dexter. And they said, we're going to stop payment. And then it restarted. And the reason it restarted is because they threatened a racial discrimination lawsuit against the authorities there in Minnesota. Interestingly enough, the Attorney General in Minnesota had a meeting with the key folks in this particular program, and then they find out a couple weeks later they start sending him campaign contributions. I think it's politics. I think it's politics driving it all. And that's why it's appropriate we're investigating here at the congressional level. That's why it's appropriate the Department of Justice has put in place a specific individual to focus on this, not only in Minnesota, but around the country.
I recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Dexter, let me make sure we got this right. You get tips and complaints, whistleblowers or others come to you and tell you something's not right at these child care centers in your state that are getting all kinds of taxpayer money. Is that right? That's how it started?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you go and do your work. You got 28 years experience investigating things, and specifically in the crime and financial fraud area. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you go out and find out these child care centers, there aren't any kids. No kids are there. I mean, there's some, but there's like, you don't see the playgrounds. You don't see any kids at a place where they're supposed to be helping children. And then you also find out most of them are run by Somali individuals. Is that accurate?
That is correct.
And then you make some recommendations. You said, here's what we should do. I think you put this on page 2 of your testimony. You said there's some basic things you should do. No, you said they didn't have biometric attendance system. They should do that. They should have electronic submission requirements. They need security cameras. You made some recommendations.
Yes.
And then what happened?
Nothing.
They ignored your recommendations, but it didn't stop there, did it? They ignored your recommendations. They called you a racist, right?
Correct.
Typical left. I always say the left will tell a lie. Big media will report it. You tell the truth. They call you a racist. Exactly what happened here. So they ignore your recommendations. They call you a racist, but it even got worse than that. You can imagine. They started investigating you. Is that right?
Yes, we were interviewed by an outside firm for a report given to the Office of Legislative Auditor.
What did that report look like? What did they say? They call you a racist. What did the report say?
The report basically questioned our investigative tactics. Looked at how our unit was managed.
Even though you had 28 years experience in this particular area, tips and whistleblowers came to you, even though that was the whole catalyst for doing this.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. And the end result is what? The end result is Miss Larson, who's actually helping people, she
Correct.
suffers and the people she helps suffers. All right, Miss Larson? Not to mention the fact that taxpayers are getting ripped off. But the people who do good work, who actually help people, you suffered.
The disabled are paying for the money stolen.
Yeah. And why do you think all this is the case? I mean, all this brings me to seems to be a typical pattern. But in the end, you got to ask why. Why was, when you point out what's going on, you have good people doing good work who suffer, the taxpayers are getting ripped off. Someone's got to ask, well, why did they take the not follow your recommendations, call you a racist, investigate you instead of just fixing the problem? Why did they do that? What could be the answer? Anyone want to hazard a Mr. Shirley, you want to hazard a guess why that's the case?
Well, they simply use that as a deflection technique to make you not want to speak out against the fraud.
Yeah, it seems to me it's politics, though. You think it's politics, Mr. Dexter?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, the people at the top, like, well, we don't want to do this. We don't want to be called racist. In fact, we found that out a week ago in a hearing where we were looking at this Feeding Our Future program. We found out they actually shut that program off for a while. They said, time out, something's not right here. They found the same kind of things you found, Mr. Dexter. And they said, we're going to stop payment. And then it restarted. And the reason it restarted is because they threatened a racial discrimination lawsuit against the authorities there in Minnesota. So, okay, forget about the fact that when we do this, we restart the money, we're going to hurt good people like Ms. Larson and the people she helps and rip off the taxpayers. We're going to do it all for politics. And we also found, interestingly enough, the Attorney General in Minnesota had a meeting with the key folks in this particular program, and then they find out a couple weeks later they start sending in campaign contributions. I think it's politics. I think it's politics driving it all. And that's why it's appropriate we're investigating here at the congressional level. That's why it's appropriate the Department of Justice has put in place a specific individual to focus on this, not only in Minnesota, but around the country. I talk too much. Anyone else want to throw in? I'll give you, Mr. Shirley, Ms. Larson, a chance to say anything if you want. If not, I'll yield 28 seconds to our chairman. I yield 20 seconds, the remaining of my time to the chairman.
Thank you. So, Mr. Hedler Godet, would it surprise you that Joe Biden issued pardons to someone named Crundell, who had the largest municipal fraud in the country's history and had a restitution amount of $53.7 million that was never paid following the commutation? Would that surprise you, sir?
That would not surprise me. And actually, in my written statement, I outline how pardons under the last administration, the Biden administration, they also fall into the same pattern of pardoning convicted fraudsters. So I'm in agreement with you there.
Yeah, thank you. And without objection, that time's expired. So without objection, Mr. Klein will be permitted to participate in today's hearing for the purpose of questioning the witness if a member yields him time for that purpose. And now we're going to go to Mr. Moore from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All this talk about pardons and the ultimate shyster, one of them was Hunter Biden. He got pardoned after Joe promised he wasn't going to do that on the way out. So anyway, that's another pardon for another day. Ms. Larson, I'm impressed with your son. I honestly thought he was your attorney when you guys were sitting there. But were there early warning signs, if acted on, that could have prevented the fraud schemes from growing to the scale that we see now?
I'd say yes. Looking back, this Somali community in Minnesota has a high prevalence of autism, and I know that because I serve a lot of minorities in my centers. So when these centers started popping up, I thought, good for them. You know, like I took care of my son. We have had a waiting list for 5 years, so I thought it was a positive. And then it just started to go and go, where now it's 400 plus of these, and it started to. I didn't Nick Shirley it. That's a verb now. I go out and go see, because obviously I'm busy and that's not what I have time for. But I think there were a lot of early warning signs. I think if anybody was actually paying attention,
They would have caught it.
oh, 100%,
Because how long have you been in business? 20 years? Is
over 20 years,
it? And you went through a number of audits, I think, every year, right?
every year.
So how is it that these groups are getting away with it, and you're under the thumb of the government auditing you every year? Why do you think that is?
I either there's a double standard and they don't, for whatever reason, have the same expectations that we do, or they're just looking.
Maybe Chairman Jordan was onto something. Maybe it's politics.
Yeah.
Mr. Shirley, now I guess investigative journalists are known as right-wing social media influencers. So can you confirm how many daycare centers you personally visited in Minnesota during your investigation?
During that first video, we went to around 7.
How did you select those facilities? I know you said earlier footprints in the snow, but how is it that you identified those facilities to go to initially?
So the man David in the video, he had the daycares with the CCAP funding, and we just simply drove around Minnesota and around Minneapolis area.
It took a lot of courage to do that, I would imagine. Probably more so now than what it was when you initially did it. 100 million views, you said.
Yes, over 140 million views on X alone.
So what was Mr. David's background? How did you connect with him, and how did he call you, or did you reach out?
He simply is just a man in Minnesota who has a passion for his city. He's been seeing fraud taking place for years, and out of all the thousands of messages I get on Instagram and other platforms, I just happened to read his, and he provided me the information, so I gave him a phone call.
And then from there, just went to those different facilities. What was probably the most interesting thing as you were doing this? I think I saw the video. We watched it, and it looked like there was a number of facilities like in the same building.
Yes. So in one building, there was, I believe, 3 daycares and there was no children, and they were all receiving CCAP funding for separate daycares. There was one daycare we went to that one day it was closed by the government, and then that same day it was reopened underneath another name. They both received CCAP funding.
I bet, Ms. Larson, they probably weren't getting audited nearly like you were.
I would guess not.
So how many daycares are there in Minneapolis we think are fraudulent right now? Mr. Shirley, any idea? Or the amount of money total? You get any idea on that?
Well, they've frozen over $185 million, and not a single business has been able to prove that they're a legitimate business yet.
It's 185 million for sure that we know. Mr. Dexter, I got a question for you. What common patterns or warning signs usually indicate that the provider or the program may be committing fraud? As you were doing your investigations and 28 years of experience, what are some of the indicators that you see that maybe that should be a telltale sign or a red flag that there's fraud there?
Well, one of the immediate signs that we saw when we would go out to first look at the location is where that was located. A lot of times they were located in commercial areas. And I'm not talking like strip malls or anything like that. I'm talking about like industrial areas where you wouldn't typically find a child care center. We would notice that there was no play area, and if there was any play equipment, it was bare minimum. Now, there was an exception that if there was a playground area within a very short walking distance, that would count. But a lot of times we didn't see that. But the most glaring thing was that when we watched the centers, you know, we would sit and watch it for a couple of days before we even put up surveillance cameras. We would watch, and we would see little to no children present. If anything, there would be a few kids.
As you begin to blow the whistle, the investigator became
Gentleman's
investigator.
time has expired.
I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Joining me now is